Hello, my friends. This is Rick the Fat Man. This is your seats at table. I happen to have Frankie the shelter cat wandering around beneath my feet, so we'll see if she causes a problem or not. This is Erech and the Past of the Dead, a fantasy role-playing adventure module for J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth, from the Middle Earth, also known as MERP, from Iron Crown Enterprises, circa late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, Frankie? Yeah, is that right? And we shall get started. There's some. This is one of those. It's an interesting adventure module, and there's some key information in here that comes out of the books and the movies that emphasis on it, but don't quite cover it. And this gives us a bit more background and story on the subject material, the cursed warriors of the unfaithful or whatever, and one of those strange things that I've always wondered about is Erech, the sphere itself. So this is, if you look at the rendition here in relation to the people standing, and this is fairly accurate because it utilizes the dimensions given by Tolkien in his works. And it's implied that this is one of those artifacts that were brought to Middle Earth from Nurmur by uh, the faithful when they escaped the downfall. And it's brought way up here into the mountains near the Pass of the Dead, and it's just set down, partially embedded in the ground, and Isidore uses it to bind the Daen Coentis to it. I find that questionable, the lore behind it a little bit. Just starting by the sheer size of this thing, the implied weight, if it's magical in nature, might be much less than what it would be if it was not. What it's made out of and what its true purpose is never established. What it did or what it represented in Nuremberg has never been established to my best of my knowledge. If you know something about it that I don't and have read about it somewhere where I haven't, which you may very well have, please by all means leave a comment and let me know. Yes, Frankie? Yes? Are we about to get into trouble? Because you know if you jump up here, I'm going to put you out the door. Because I'm not going to have you climb in on the laptop, because you will do that, or she will tear out the wires, or she will do something and become just a friendly nuisance. It's all part of the being young and wiry and crazy. I get it. I miss those days sometimes. So the stone itself is quite large. It would take a lot of men to carry, or significant horses and wagon to carry and hold space. The faithful escaped with 15 ships, and I don't believe that they were the size of superliners. So the fact is that space was very limited and very precious. So this thing must have some very big significance other than its ties to the army of the undead. Just speculating on that. So anyway, Tolkien's Middle Earth, Iron Crown Enterprises, a nice little map on the front page, Paths of the Dead. Frankie, I'm telling you, don't get silly. Published in 1985, same year I graduated. Guidelines, small entry, definition of terms, your typical conversion stats for using other game mechanics, game systems. So the introduction. Below the towering heights of the arid Nirmis, the White Mountains lays the Mortha, the Black Root Vale, a rich land of rolling fertile fields and rushing alpine streams. This was long ago the land of the Daen Coentis, or the people of skill. A folk later became known as the Dunlandings. Their tribes ranged in these rich valley lands and farmed these fields, hunted the green mountain forests, and herded in the meadows and mined the cliffs and gorges. The Daen Coentis were never very many, but they were skilled warriors, workers in stone, and keen observers of the seasons and the night skies. They erected hundreds of massive stone observatories that served as both calendars and as temples to the Valar, whom they worshipped as gods. Their peaceful existence came to an end in the middle of the Second Age during the dark years of Sauron. The devout but primitive religion of the Daen Coentis made it relatively easy for the Dark Lord to subvert the worship of these people, and with the passing of years, the Evil One preyed upon their superstitions. The bonding of the Dunedain and the Daen Coentis. At the same time, the Dunedain settlers came across the sea from Nuremberg in ever-increasing numbers. The High Men and Westernese were more efficient farmers and miners than the Daen Coentis. That this one section emphasizes some of the stuff I've said in previous videos about Isildur and his sons, and the 15 ships of faithful were not by any means the only Numerians in Middle-earth. It established that many years before. Since the settlement of Nuremberg, certain Dunedain have gone to Middle-earth and settled, and this emphasizes that. So when Isildur comes to Middle-earth from the Fallen, and he goes to Arnor, his sons go to Gondor, they already find large concentrations of existing Dunedain, Numerians, who have lived and grown up and propagated and created a very significant base of people. Otherwise, Isildur and his few hundreds or few thousands at best, like I speculated in one video, if the biggest ships that Nuremberg produced were typical or atypical of ships of the late Middle Ages, the early ship years of modern middle, you know what I'm saying. At best, maybe 300 or 400 people on the ship, including the crews. It's unlikely that they would have crammed 1,000 people aboard one of these things unless they were huge, plus all the stuff they carried and their supplies and things like this. So the lion's share of the population of the Dunedain were already in existence in Middle-earth. So how relations except the oath breaking, the curse of the oath breakers, last alliance, expansion of Lambden. Let's see. In those days, the paths of the dead were nothing but the tombs of the deceased kings, princes, nobles. For the Daen Coentis rages these immense stone masons worked at establishing and providing these immense natural path under the mountain, later called the Dimmerberg, which they themselves called Heaven of the Lost Lords. It says here, the king of the Daen Coentis, Merrill Glaston, had sworn an oath of friendship to Elendil and his heirs, declaring that the Daen Coentis and their great fortress, so it's Elendil, not Isildur, that came here and led us fable. And I know that. I'm just, like I said, old and decrepit and still waking up. So this is where they swore the oath. And then later they broke the oath, which then led to the curse. And somehow the Erech Stone is part of that. So, expansion of Lambden, Third Age, 569. Thurember, the ninth king of Gondor, granted to Gondor, younger son of a lesser Dunedain household, the Morthad Valley of Lambden promised to hold as a crown fief. Gondor-styled Prince of Morthad began construction what later becomes Morthadost, or the Black Fortress. See, the Princess of Morthad, his grandson, also worked on the fortress. It was not completed and named until Third Age, 714. Soon a town sprang up for the fortress. It was named Stone of Erech. Land around Erech, White Mountain Caverns, foothills and vales of Morthad, the climate, the flora. The region is rich in easily accessible minerals deposits. Mining is a part of the region and has been for decades, or for ages past. Pretty much everybody who settles the region. It is, or would be considered, a backwater of Gondor. None of this, no raids from Umbar or other sea corsairs get to this far inland. No huge orc tribes inhabited the White Mountains. Guarantee that Gondor would run them out and stomp on them. Then that means the only true threat are Dunlandings to the west, and the few that still live in the region, but they're significantly different from the Dunlandings to the plains to the west. So there's very little outward threat other than the undead. This is what makes this whole region a conundrum, where it sees modest population growth, a modest settlement and farming and estates and a few handful of villages and thorps along with the Stone of Erech. Then the people living here learn to deal with the undead, or to avoid dealing with the undead. For the most part, they don't go out after dark. They leave the dark in certain areas of the highlands and the deep mountain valleys to the undead and Arcanum. It's just what it is. So the foothills, the climate, the flora, enchanted herbs, poisons, the fauna, the flora, the inhabitants, the local folk, the Daen Coentis, which are gone, the Dunlandings, which still inhabit some of the upper vales and also act as lesser people, lesser citizens of Gondor for some perspective. The Dunedain themselves, the predominant folk of the Vale, talks about when they settled, when they came, what they do. Excuse me. So they were settling for the farmlands. They built a new society over many years, married the indigenous Dunlandings who chose to remain, and the lines of others are diluted because of intermarriage with settlers from the north or east. The region is full citizens of Gondor, since they're subject to orders and laws of the crown, or be authorities held by the Prince of Morthod, etc., etc. Foreign folk, Northmen, Easterlings, Elves. Says the firstborn are hardly ever seen in Morthod, but these have been some rumors of small bands of sylvan elves in the mountain forests, certain wandering animists and herbalists of the Dunlanding ancestors claim to have received help from the elves, finding rare herbs in exchange for elf stones, which are mined locally. Dwarves, becomes increasingly obvious that little precious metal and certainly no mithril can be found in the region. The dwarves travel less frequently to the certain more central White Mountains. However, they still need to maintain their need for trade in high quality iron and gems, and some remain in Orthodox mining towns. Most dwarves keep to themselves, but a few unusually gregarious ones. Dark races, hill trolls, cave trolls, for the most part, trolls. Undead races. That's where we get in. They're undead races, exactly what it says. Undead are an unfortunate fact of life in the Morthid region, especially in the wilds in and near the mountains around the old Daen Coentis stoneworks and, of course, along the paths of dead. Another province of Gondor suffers so great a plight of these accursed creatures. But then again, no land is so holy that to its ancient lords, and no other realm is burdened with such a great curse as the one of the Oathbreakers. So we got ghouls, skeletons, wraiths, ghosts, for the most part. And we got politics, sites of interest. Sarnark, the largest town. Morthos, the fortress of the prince of the region, the hill of Erech. So this is what it said. A great grassy hill rises from the empty rolling fields 3 miles to the southeast of Sarn Erech. The hill of Erech, the most commanding point in the vale of the same name, revered by Daen Coentis and the Dunlandings, is now the haunted height. Its true name is the frightful place. Atop the hill is half-buried Stone of Erech, a black glassine globe commonly believed to be one of the holy stones used by the Daen Coentis. Locals believe the stone fell from the sky as a sign of the spot in the center of the world, but they learn no better. The Erech Stone is an ion ore born from Nirmer and erected by Isildur in 2nd Age 3320. By this stone, the Daen swore allegiance to Gondor, and here the army of the dead will gather at the summit of the rightful oath-breaking. For now, however, ghosts come to the hill every night, guarding its spiral path and secrets of the stone. So the locals believe it's been here all along, and it says Isildur brought it. Now, this is just my opinion. In a wider range of view, I think that the latter, or the former, is probably more closer to the truth. I believe this stone may have been created by the Daen Coentis, the men of skill, or the people of skill, at some point in their past, as a religious object of some sort. And maybe that it was a natural stone that once again did fall from the sky and it was worked into the sphere that it is. This suggests to me that the sphere is half buried, so it's been on this hill a long time. There was probably, if you were to uncover the whole thing, there's probably a platform and some sort of support, dais or something that holds this thing up. That's just buried under the dirt. And then later, when the visitor comes, the story gets reworked, as often stories do, to explain that it was something that the Numerians brought and it was used for a mighty purpose. But once again, what that original purpose of this thing, it's not a sting stone. It doesn't have any of the inclinations of a sting stone from the brief description that's given in the books. So This is a very large object that just lugged way up here in the middle of nowhere. Back in those days, this would have been the true wilderness because Gondor had not expanded this far. So there's a lot of mystery just around the sphere itself. Make of it what you will. Town of Orsen in the Pass of the Dead. Now we get into adventure guidelines, selecting adventure, choosing a time period, suggestions winning adventures. So the tradition is 1640, which is roughly 1,000 years before the War of the Ring. Is 4 years after the Great Plague has ravaged most of the West, and parts of the South and the East. We see Gondor still has a king. There's still Arthedain in Arnor. Angmar is still present. The dwarves are still prosperous. Moria the Belrog has not been released yet. The elves are Osnodal are splintered and spread. So we've got Lahorn on the rise. Golgundor is the haunt of the necromancer, i.e. Sauron in disguise. Gondor still patrols and maintains fortresses within the bounds of Mordor to keep it locked down. But they're slowly dwindling with each generation. There's fewer and fewer guard posts being maintained, and eventually, in the not too distant future, they will all be abandoned and left to the devices of the Dark Lord. In the east, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's pending invasions. There's settlements in the north. There are human settlements that are thriving. The elves are thriving in Thunderal's kingdom. The burnings are in large numbers in the valley, Anduin Valley. And the far north of Anduin is the predecessors of the Rohirrim. Eventually will come to the aid of the south. There's a lot going on politically and economically and socially all throughout the area at that time. So it's something to take into play. This would have been at 1640. I do not believe this still would be an extreme back order. I believe that it said that by Third Age 714, I think is when the actual Morthod fortress is completed, and the Prince of Morthod controls the region, and it slowly develops, but never develops as fully as some of the heart kingdoms of Gondor. And that's one of the things I'll get to a little later is on some of these modules. There were so many regions and areas that yet to be explored and tapped when ice folded over. So, as always, I wish there were more things to go on and great materials and so on and so forth, but we have what we have. Ventures in the Vale of Erech, Journeying into the Vale, the Tale of Gondor, the First Morthod, Town of St. Erech. We got details. It's not a walled town, but town of the first merchants, shopkeepers settled, shadow of the fortress. Occasional renegade bear or backwatered band was the only likely threat. So here we see a town that doesn't have walls. That's pretty benign for the most part. It is still reeling from the effects and ravages of the plague. Probably 20% of its population died. There's 4 known empty buildings now, and there's something in here. There's a portion in here. One of the landlords is either willing to rent or sell the property to the player characters if they have the means to take care of it. We got the town breakdowns, professional establishments, private homes, buildings for sale, the townhouse, the inn, the shop. The NPC in the Vale of Erech, prominent townfolk people would be around 1640, although this could be adjusted for pretty much any timeline if you choose to play it in. Prominent fortresses, people at the fortress, number of funky adventures. In a nutshell, part of it revolves around one adventure is you going up to the Erech Stone looking for something and dealing with the undead. Another one is that the current Prince of Morthod is a fraud, in as his older sister was supposed to be the one that was to be the princess and not him in charge, and somehow or another he returns right after the plague's over with, and she's disappeared, and he takes over. In reality, she's actually his captive and held in a dungeon cell, and the characters are picked to go find her and free her. The fortress itself, interior, exterior, bridge gate, so on and so forth. The Old Bailey, quite a bit of information. I like this one too because it gives me a breakdown of a traditional medieval castle made to fit Middle Earth, of course, and there's so much usable information that it makes for a good off-the-cuff castle location for any of your campaigns without you needing to do a whole lot of extra work. Just change some of the names and so on and so forth. But that's me being lazy. So rescue Arwen, an adventurer. So obviously the foremost adventure is set in the Vale. Erech calls for the discovery of the truth about Prince Eredor's dastardly deeds and to rescue the Princess Arwen and win from captivity in the underparts of her own house. Thrifty adventurers might dwell on the treasures of the vaults of Lower Mothados. And then we have Adventures in the Path of Dead. Subterranean reaches the Path of Dead, haunted delving beneath the White Mountains, Tale of the Tombs, Task, Tomb Guardians, a lot of animated stone and other things along with the undead to deal with. A lot of stuff you probably don't want to mess with. Payouts to the laughs, layout of the paths. So it's a natural. I would use a dungeon crawl loosely because that's not how this works. You're not going to encounter trolls and negas and orcs in these caverns. You're going to encounter the undead in various forms and the defensive works, traps, and animated statues that were left behind to protect the place. So enter at your own risk. There's our typical NPC chart with all the data information. There you have it. Nice another map of the area. Gondor, the White Mountains stretches way down here. And so this is the central White Mountains. The opposite side is Dunharrow, right? So this is the Morthid Valley and Erech, which is a princedom. And they owe their allegiance to the King of Gondor as well as the Prince of Lambden. So kind of hierarchy thing. What have you. There you have it. Paths of the Dead.